Welcome to the show, guys. Got a super exciting one here for you. We are back here in the backyard. Happy weekend. I know a lot of you guys are drafting today, so I think it's super fitting to do a video today on top 10 tips to win your leagues, guys. Practical tips, practical advice that's going to give you an advantage in your league. So buckle up, guys. Get ready. I'm going to give you guys 10 winning tips on how to win your fantasy football leagues. Practical advice, and no one else is telling you here in this video. Let's get to it. All right, guys, welcome to the show. 10 tips to dominate your leagues. I'm excited to get to it. We got clear skies behind me. Happy weekend, everybody. And like I said, I know a lot of you guys are drafting this weekend. I want to make sure you guys are prepared here on this YouTube video, giving you 10 practical tips. Before I do, guys, I'm giving a lot of value here. Make sure you guys do smash that thumbs up. It helps the channel. Hit the thumbs up, guys. And also comment below. Let me know what you guys think of the tips, or if there's any other tips you want to offer to other people here that are listening. Your value is appreciated. Now, guys, very important, guys, grab the 16-round draft solution. I've linked it below. Sleepers, breakouts, optimal players drafted in each round. Everything you need to crush your league. You'll be light years ahead of the competition. Grab 16 rounds. I've linked it below. Use code SMASH to save. All right, let's dive into these tips. Again, thumbs up really helps. Only takes 2 seconds. Really helps the channel. All right. So 10 tips to help you guys crush your leagues. Nobody else on the Concheapsis consensus is helping you. They're just giving you last year's top finishers and saying, hey, draft in this order. I see draft kits come out, but they're literally just copy and paste rankings that you get on the app that you're drafting on. So whatever platform you're using to draft on, those are the rankings. Like, you get them in the order. So when you're doing your draft, the ranking's already there for you. So draft kits are irrelevant. Magazines are irrelevant because they're the exact same thing as, you know, the platform you're drafting on. So I'm going to give you guys some practical tips. That's why I created 16 rounds, is because I didn't like the way things were being done and I wanted to do them better, and I did them light years better. That's why 16 rounds is a game changer. So that, by the way, that's 11 tips. Get 16 rounds. The answers are all there. Printable cheat sheet. Everything's there, okay? All right, so now, what do you do here? What are some big tips? What's going to give you the advantage? Tip number 1, okay? Fantasy football draft strategy. Tip number 1. And I want to do this outside because, again, it's just nice air out here. It's the weekend. It's sunny out. Guys, fantasy's supposed to be fun. Don't stress about it. You got this, all right? I'm going to make sure you guys got this. Tip number 1, you guys hear me talk about this, load up on those running backs. Why? It's the most scarce position. If you do not load up on running backs, you're going to be in trouble. Now, if you guys just saw preseason week 2, Bijan Robinson looking good on a couple of those runs. He had an amazing one-handed catch. He looks like the real deal, and that's why I got him first overall. Okay, and they ran the ball like 500 times last year. Okay. First overall, fantasy football 2023 is Bijan for me. Again, once you understand these tips, you understand, oh, wow, Joe's making sense, okay? So load up on running backs, the most scarce position. You don't want to end up with Miles Sanders or J.K. Dobbins as your RB1. That's going to be trouble. You want consistency. You want volume getters. And it's such a scarce position, and it keeps changing. They keep adding more committees, and, you know, the league is changing before our eyes, and running backs are becoming more scarce. So I implore you guys to load up on running backs early. That's tip number 1, all right? Most scarce position. I lay that exactly on how to do that in the 16-round draft session, which running backs to get in each round, which players to get in each round, all the optimal players. I'm going to plug 16 rounds because I really believe in it. That's my bread and butter, and it's going to help you guys win. All right. Tip number 2, anchor your team with an ace quarterback. Guys, this is the year out of all years where you really need an ace quarterback. You need a Hurts, you need an Allen. Now, you don't necessarily have to spend a 3rd-round pick on a Hurts or an Allen. You can get a Herbert later, for example, right? And I'm telling you guys, this is the year to get ace quarterback. Why? Because there's uncertainty at that position. Jordan Love, Pickett, like you got second-year quarterbacks like Pickett coming in. You got Desmond Ridder as well. These guys could be efficient quarterbacks. They could be great for fantasy, but we're not sure. And you want to be sure at the quarterback position because you got to anchor your team with an ace quarterback. That's tip number 2. It's very, very important. And then a bonus tip with it, tip number 2, is you want to back up that quarterback. So always back up that quarterback, which we'll get to in a second, okay? So that's tip number 2, anchor your team with an ace quarterback. You want that certainty. You don't want a rookie quarterback coming in with the jitters and then throwing a lot of picks. That could be a huge problem. So anchor your team with an ace quarterback is tip number 2. Hopefully you guys are writing these down. You need to implement them because they actually work, all right? Tip number 3, do not follow the consensus, the Concheapsis rankings. This will not help you. I'm telling you guys. Because, for example, okay, Tank Dell had a mini breakout in week 1 of preseason, okay? Jalen Hyatt just had a mini breakout in week 2. If you saw that big catch, okay, from a Tyrod Taylor, the Giants, okay? Jalen Hyatt is ranked 87th amongst wide receivers. Tank Dell is ranked like 108th, okay? These guys were literally going undrafted. Now you could say, well, Joe, nobody drafts that early. We're going to see the breakout before the season. It's not the point. These guys are ranked 100th amongst wide receivers. These guys could be wide receivers ones and should be wide receiver ones potentially on their team. Now, there's other guys there, John Mechie on the Texans and Hodgins and all that on the Giants. There's other options, and other guys could emerge. But you got to understand, guys, that these rookies coming in are in a position to succeed. And in 16 rounds, I lay it out, and I tell you guys to draft these guys and stash these guys instead of having them going undrafted. Well, you could say, well, Joe, waiver wire wonder. Well, you don't want to be going to the waiver wire when these guys break out. You want to see that in the draft. You want to see these guys before they break out, right? That's why 16 rounds is a game changer and rankings don't help you. So tip number 3, don't follow the rankings because, again, Walker was ranked way behind Penny last year, right? DeAndre Swift was top 8 running back, and I told you he was going to bust. You got to see things. I see things before they happen. Do you understand? You got to skate to where the puck is going to be, not to where the puck is, and that's what everybody does. And the reason that the mainstream consensus do these rankings is because they hedge their bets. They play it safe. They're like, okay, these guys finished on top. It's a safe thing to do. We don't want to look bad if we're completely wrong. They don't even want to put Byjan ahead of Christian McCaffrey because it just sounds ridiculous. Oh, the guy's unproven. We're going to go with Mr. Safe and Reliable. But Mr. Safe and Reliable, Christian McCaffrey, actually only played 10 games in 2020, 2021 and has shown his size of injuries, and he's coming off a pinnacle year. So you got to take a look at all the scenarios. Now, Christian McCaffrey could still have a good year, but that's besides the fact. But they're not anticipating and shifting and looking at different scenarios. They're just looking at what happened last year, and that's not going to help you. So tip number 3, don't follow the consensus rankings. Think outside the box. Again, Tank Dell ranked 100th. I doubt Tank Dell, based on what we've seen in preseason and training camp, is going to finish 100th amongst wide receivers. Draft them earlier. Make sure you get them at the right ADP and maybe a couple rounds before the ADP, okay? Tip number 4, do not draft tight ends early, okay? Mark Andrews, I think it was a year or two ago, was drafted early, busted, and there's a big fall off after Travis Kelce. And I don't like Travis Kelce either in the early rounds because I'm loading up on the most scarce position. Back to tip number 1, load up on running backs early, the most scarce position. You can get yourself a wild card upside tight end. I'll give you a bonus one. Again, I'm giving you guys tons of information. Smash thumbs up. But a Sam Laporta that has that top 10 potential. You get him absolutely later. He's ranked 24th amongst tight ends. You get like an upside tight end, and a safe tight end, you're covered. Because all I want is 10 points out of my tight end. Because again, there's a big fall off after Travis Kelce. So don't worry about tight end too much. You don't have to draft them super early. And again, there's tons of value, tons of second-year tight ends. And Jimmy Maverick, who's a partner with me on the podcast, did a podcast episode explaining the second-year tight ends have a big emergence. So guys like K-Dot and Jelani Woods, guys you can get later, can really emerge this year. So do not invest early on tight end. If you miss on Kelce at that point, you can get a lot of value at tight end later, okay? Very, very important tip. And then get a safe tight end and back him up with an upside one, okay? All right, tip number 5. Secure a top 10 defense, all right? This is very important, all right? I do this in all my leagues. Now you're saying, well, Joe, defense is the last pick. I'll tell you why you need to secure a top 10 defense. It's very simple. Because you want a defense that's going to consistently produce, and you're confident that they're going to produce every single week. You don't really want to be scrambling to the waiver wire every single week and trying to get best matchup, okay? Now, there's a ton of good defenses with good seasons schedule-wise this year that you can get, but understand, getting a top 10 defense, and this is where I would say you kind of got to look at last year, because when the draft comes in, lots of DBs are drafted, linebackers, there's so many changes that are made on defenses. But if you take a look at last year, you can see how a defense did, and there shouldn't be a major, drastic, catastrophic difference. So you got these defenses like the Eagles and like the Cowboys and the Bills that have done well for the past couple years. Try to aim for a consensus. This is the only time I'll ever say go Sheep says. Try to get a consensus top 10 defense in your draft. You're going to be very happy because you're going to get that anchor on your team every single week. Now, most teams are straying away from defenses. I don't like defenses in leagues. I just think they're kind of pointless. They're a little volatile at times. But try to get a top 10 defense. So how do you do that? So as soon as you see a defense start coming off, take a look at one in the next round, okay? And you guys get the sleepers later, because in your league, if you got 16 rounds, a lot of people won't know who the sleepers are, so you'll be ahead of them, okay? So try to get a top 10 defense, okay? Tip number 6, Wait on a kicker. This is a position I don't really care about. This is tip number 6. This is where I actually do wait, because a kicker, guys, from a top kicker, like let's say a Justin Tucker, to like the 12th kicker, there isn't a huge fall off in points. It's minimal. I mean, from a game to game basis, you're looking at 2 to 3 to 4 points difference per kicker per game. When I look at a kicker, it doesn't really matter. I draft based on ADP. I try to get defenses that are relatively high score, offenses that are relatively high, so then I get a kicker on that team because I know they can get the red zone. I know they can get into field goal range. But again, I don't put too much emphasis on kickers. Wait on kicker. It's not that important. And again, most leagues are omitting kickers. I encourage you guys, if you're a commissioner, to omit the kicker position. I just think it's a pain in the butt. Okay? Tip number 7. Know your ADPs and don't get sniped. This is very important as well. If you want a particular player, for example, right? I like Jahmyr Gibbs a lot this year. I like the value. He was coming off typically in round 3. I see his ADP rising. So if I'm drafting 12th, I get the 12th, 13th pick. I may want to consider grabbing Gibbs if I really want him with my second pick at 13. Does that make sense? Know your ADP, because he's not coming back around. It's just being able to anticipate knowing when players come off the board and being able to grab them. You've done your research, you've done your homework, you've gotten 16 rounds, and now you want that player. But if you're not aware of exactly when they're coming off, if you haven't done a lot of mock drafts, if you're not familiar with what the Consheepsis are doing, this is where you leverage the Consheepsis to your advantage, because they're going to be drafting, most people are going to be drafting on ADP. You're not going to know when your player is going to come off and they get sniped. Now, understand there's a lot of fans. Like, I'm wearing a Titans hat, so if you see a guy in your league come in and walk in with a Titans hat and you know he's a Titans fan, look for Derrick Henry to come off a few spots earlier, maybe a round or two earlier. Do you understand that, guys? So, I mean, in this case, Derrick Henry's coming off end of round 1, so not a round or two earlier. Bad example, but you guys get what I mean. Anticipate, guys, okay? Maybe Hopkins comes off a round or two earlier, all right? So let's keep going here. So that was tip number 7. Know your ADPs and don't get sniped in the draft. You don't want to lose those players you've worked so hard to research. You want to get them on your team, right? They're the elite, all right? Number 8, this is a very important tip. So make sure you guys are writing this down. Have a backup plan for a backup plan. Meaning, guys, very simple, okay? If you got a quarterback, get a backup quarterback. Why? Because you want to cover your bye weeks, you want to cover potential lack of performance, and you want to cover potential, God forbid, lack of injury, lack of performance, and bye weeks. That's quarterback. Tight end, you got that uncertainty at tight end. Why not go for that upside tight end that could overtake your safe tight end, right? Because you've drafted 2. So have a backup plan for a backup plan. This is why I'm saying go robust RB early as well, because with those running backs, if you get like a Miles Sanders, your backup is going to be somebody who's totally a wild card, right? You got to go with those running backs early. It's a scarce position. You're able to back up other positions very well. There's a ton of depth, especially in one quarterback league. There's a ton of depth at quarterback, especially in a one tight end start league. There's tons of tight ends, right? Tons of wide receiver ones later. With running back, you're not able to back them up. That's why, going back to tip number 1, load up on running backs, leading to tip number 8, have a backup plan for a backup plan, having depth and aiming higher on the depth chart. There's a bonus tip within a tip, guys. There's so much value here. Smash that thumbs up. Aim high on the depth chart, which I'll get to in a second with number 9, popular names. I'll get to in a second. So, backup plan for a backup plan. Okay, cover yourself. Tip number 9, don't go for popular names, which goes back to what I was saying, aim high on the depth chart. A lot of people will draft a guy like a Tyler Boyd. I always pick on that guy because he sucks. He's a wide receiver 3 on his team, yet people will draft him because they're familiar with the name and they know who he is, or an Odell Beckham Jr. I remember, guys, a couple years ago, Odell was being drafted. There was 3 years in a row Odell was being drafted in round 1. I'm like, avoid Odell, he busted. Avoid Odell, he busted. 3 years in a row, the Consheepsis had Odell in round 1 as a suggestion, telling you to draft him because of the name, because of the popularity. Guys, you're better off going with a Jalen Hyatt later, who's ranked, going back to tip number 3, don't follow rankings, a Tank Dell or a Jalen Hyatt in the later rounds over a Tyler Boyd, because a Tyler Boyd will never surpass a Jamar Chase. Does that make sense, guys? It just never happens. It will never, ever happen. He'll never be good, but there's an opportunity for a Tank Dell to surpass a Robert Woods, right? Does that make sense? So this is the stuff, the practical stuff that I do that other people aren't doing. This is a really good video. I'm telling you, again, if you guys are paying attention, taking notes, this video alone will help you. Where 16 rounds will help you is you'll know exactly which players to omit and exactly which players to draft. But this is from a a technical, practical standpoint, so good. Okay, so again, don't go for popular names. Aim high on the depth chart. If you're taking swings later in the rounds, don't go for the safe guys just because you know their name. Do some research. Aim high on the depth chart. I mean, the Giants drafted high in the third round for a reason, right? Tank Dell was brought on to the Texans for a reason. CJ Stroud asked for him. And this is the type of stuff you need to know. This is the type of stuff you subscribe, you listen, you watch my stuff, you get to hear this way before. I did a post on Tank Dell. I'm not saying Tank Dell is going to be a breakout. He could be an absolute bust. So I want to go on record for that. But I did a video on Tank Dell back in May. And then as soon as week 1 preseason happened, he made that amazing catch. And you're hearing in camp he is just unguardable. That news is breaking out now. But I was on it like 3 months ago. So again, guys, it's always skating to where the puck's going to be instead of where the puck is. You got to anticipate backup plan for a backup plan, and don't follow popular names. And the last one here, guys, is take risks, okay? Everybody in your draft is going to be following the ADP. If they're not listening to my stuff, everyone else is putting out garbage. They're going to not be taking risks. What do you mean by taking risks? Meaning not being afraid to grab a Jahmyr Gibbs round 2. Could he bust? Yes. But remember tip number 8. You've got a backup plan for a backup plan. You got tons of depth. You're going to be good. But you're going for that upside player. Do you know what I'm saying? Instead of drafting somebody super safe, somebody who's like, everybody in round 1, 2, and 3 should be relatively secure. Once you get into rounds 4 to 7, then you can start, reaching a little bit a round or two earlier on an upside guy. Like I really like Quentin Johnston. I'd rather have the upside of Quentin Johnston round 7 than a round 3 pick with Keenan Allen, who's old, washed up, etc. Right? So understand, guys, you can take risks. Don't be afraid to draft some rookies later after you've secured your sneaky 7, which is laid out for you in the 16-round draft. So you secure your sneaky 7, your foundation, your ace quarterback, your solid running backs, a couple ace wide receivers. You got your sneaky 7. Then you could take some risks with some major upside players and be light years ahead of the competition. Tyler Boyd's won't help you win your leagues, okay? They just won't. And there's other guys that just, backups. You don't want to get somebody's backup. All right. So there's 10 tips for you. There's way more tips. I talk about handcuffing and I explain all that. If you guys want to get a little more in depth, you can join my Patreon group for direct access to be the only place I'm giving out direct access. Patreon.com/FFcounselor. And again, these tips are ultra practical. Use them. You'll be light years ahead of the competition. Subscribe, thumbs up. Turn on that bell, guys, for notifications. And again, make sure you guys do get that 16-round draft. So I cannot explain to you enough how much you're going to be light years ahead of the competition. All right, guys, go smash your leagues. I know a lot of you guys are drafting this weekend. Good luck to all you guys. Fantasy's here. Guys, it's super exciting. Enjoy the preseason games as well. We'll talk soon. I know this brought you a lot of value. Hopefully it helps you guys win your leagues. I know it will. Use these tips. Put them in your brain. Take notes. We'll talk soon, guys. Lion mentality. I'm out.